Hey, church, we're back for some more First Corinthians. This will be our fourth one, and we are still in chapter one. And today we'll just do a little recap of what we did again last week or last time, and we'll go from verse 18 to verse 25 for today study. Anyway, let's take a look at it. Just to recap last week, um, excuse me, we saw Paul make an appeal to the church, right? And I called it a child or an approach to children, kind of a father son dynamic, making an appeal. But honestly, how many of us make appeals to our children? Probably not very often, if at all, right? But just to further elaborate on that one, they have quarrels already, right? We saw in verse 11 of that last section. So they're already going back and forth between each other. It's quarreling. There's issues. Why introduce another one with this letter to start with? So he starts with an appeal, and again he talks to him later and says, "I speak to you as to I want to speak to mature people, but you guys are immature." So on and so forth. He says it a couple different ways throughout the book. Um, so that appeal is because of their lack of maturity and he's being the mature one and not starting more quarrels, right? So there is a tough dynamic. Again, it's a hard dynamic to look at a grown man who's childish, right? Who thinks he's mature because he's 50, and yet he, by all means, he should be, and yet here we are in this context of having problems and quarrels over, whole much ado about nothing. So there's that dynamic at play. That's what I was getting at. Again, I'm leaving stuff on the table week to week, some on purpose, some not, but hoping I recap in a way that helps explain it. But leaving stuff on the table for you guys, us to start working through on our own as a church to see, is what Dan said even make any sense? You know what I mean? Like, do it, go for it. I'm not afraid of none of that. Um, and then take both sides, take an angle that you're not used to, and deal with it. So I'm halfway putting some out on purpose, mostly not, but there's definitely room from week to week to elaborate on some things. I won't do it forever because these things are getting longer as I do more of that. I got a time frame I'm trying to fit into, so we'll work on that. The divisions: Paul, Apollo, Cephas, Christ. Right? Is Christ divided? Those rhetorical questions. Again, he's talking about language, and it's not fancy language yet. Rhetoric's involved. Those questions: is Christ divided? Was Paul crucified for you? Easy answers, and yet he knew the answers to all of those. Right? I spoke on the baptized in Paul's name last week, saying he didn't ask a question that he didn't know the answer to. He asked a question he knew the answer to. Well, he did that actually with all three. He knows that he wasn't crucified. He knows that Christ is not divided, as do they. Right? So again, that fatherly wisdom, trying to draw out of youthful immaturity and lack of understanding, questioning their own views with some simple ones that everybody knows the answer to. We saw some names: Gaius, Crispus, Stephanus. I didn't elaborate on Crispus, but his name means curled, and for good reason. I think that has very big implications through the course of our understanding in this book. And I won't do that today just to keep these things shorter, but I'll reference that at some point. And if in the meantime you've got the time to kind of see what I'm getting at, maybe with the meaning of Crispus's name, if you're interested. And then we saw at the end, he's talking about baptism as he comes out of that last section. Then he says, the word in verse 17 did not send me to baptize, but to speak the good word, the gospel, and not with words of eloquent wisdom. Yes, lest the cross of the word, Christ, be emptied of its power, right? All that word, back and forth play we did last week. Well, now we continue with that. So let's see what it goes on to. Verse 18. For the word of the cross is folly to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved, it is the power of God. For it is written, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise, and the discernment of the discerning I will thwart. Where is the one who is wise? Where is the scribe? Where is the debater of this age? Has not God made foolish the wisdom of the world? For since in the wisdom of God, the world did not know God through wisdom, it pleased God through the folly of what we preach to save those who believe. For Jews demand signs and Greeks seek wisdom, but we preach Christ crucified, a stumbling block to Jews and folly to Gentiles. But to those who are called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ the power of God and the wisdom of God. For the foolishness of God is wiser than men, and the weakness of God is stronger than men. All right, so we have in verse 18, he goes, for the word of the cross is folly to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved, it is the power of God. And one I left on purpose last week was when we went through that the word Christ himself did not send me to baptize, but to speak the word, the gospel, all that back and forth wordplay of different forms of word and speaking. In verse 17, I said the dumb cross, or the folly, the foolish cross, right? And maybe the word dumb struck somebody. I was kind of hoping it would. Honestly, I won't be shy about that one. I took it more as a modern vernacular for what he's saying here. Like, these people are looking at the cross like that's dumb. And I'll go on to a minute when we get to verse 22 about how I got some of that, but I don't think it's dumb. Okay, I think that was clear in the last statements on the cross at the end of the last video. But look what he's doing here, verse 18. So we went Christ the Word in verse 17 last time. Did not send me to baptize, but to speak, preach the gospel, which is the good word, and not with words of eloquent wisdom, which was clever speech, right? In the King James. So more words, lest the cross of Christ, the word, be emptied of its power, right? That's how I played it last time. Well, now he goes in verse 18, for the word, again, of the cross is folly. So he flipped it again. In that last part of verse 17, he said, lest the cross of Christ, so the cross of the word, right? I think we can say that safely, be emptied of its power. And then in verse 18, then he says, for the word of the cross. So the cross of the word to the word of the cross is folly. So crucified the Logos, Christ, the word made flesh, right? And then in verse 18, for the word, what we have to say about that same cross is foolishness. So do you see the word himself and our words are inseparable? Now, that alludes to what he said last time when he was saying, I don't use fancy speech. I'm not eloquent, right? And yet, the eloquence and use of language and the way we put things together, in order to make sense or present our case for the gospel, or the testimony about Christ, as he said earlier in the chapter, that is important. Logos is logos, right? The word wrapped up in our words portraying the value and the significance of the word himself, right? So it's a back and forth reciprocal play between this world and the God of this world, right? How things work. It's a relational thing. This is all relationship. And you have to keep that in mind throughout the course of this book too. Without relationship, what is this? I don't have kids without a relationship with my wife. There's no future, outside of a relationship in that way. Church is relational. Good luck having the one man church. Good luck having the one man show at a big church. Neither one of those work, right? It's relational. You don't know your pastor at a megachurch. You don't know who you are. Just keep the ties rolling in. I'm not talking bad on everybody that's got a big church, but I'm just saying, as a rule around here, or times we live in, it's kind of how it goes. And the one man church is always weird. You're a weirdo all by yourself in your house, holding up your wife and kids. That's tyrannical too. But usually those, I would say in my experience, 100% of the time, them dudes are weirdos, right? But there's a place for weirdos too. So they just don't know where their place is. So it's our job to help them out. Again, there's a mature helping the immature. All right, so let's move on. But to us who's being saved, it is the power of God. So now he introduces power as a theme, and he elaborates on it from here on out. So, for it is written, right? I will destroy the wisdom of the wise, and the discernment of the discerning I will thwart. So I will destroy the wisdom of the wise. There is wisdom, right? We're all image bearers. This is God's world. No one is completely detached from Christ himself. If you exist and you breathe, you are at some level attached to the God of this world. I mean, the God of creation, not, not the not the God of this world in the negative sense, but the creator of this world, right? You, it's again inseparable. Yeah, as much as you've detached and you're not a part of the body of Christ, um, you are still existing. You have your being in Him. There is no way around that, right? It's not a level of being that anyone should want, but it is being nonetheless, and it only happens in Christ, right? All things hold together in Him, including the guy who doesn't acknowledge Christ, right? So anyway, there is wisdom. Um, there is wise people here apart from Christ, right? I say apart from Christ as recognizing Christ as the source of that wisdom. Discerning of the discernment. Again, there's cleverness, the cleverness of the clever. And we have sayings like, "Oh, you think you're clever?" You know, when someone comes up with something good or a quick zinger or something, a response, we're like, "Oh, that's pretty clever." But um, and clever is a good thing. But when we use it in that sense, like, "Oh, you think you're clever," like to the kids, I say I got young boys, they like to rebut and make jokes in my house. I'm like, "Oh, you think you're funny, right? You think you had a good one." And it may have been, that's why we use clever, but it wasn't productive. There's no fruit. Where do we go from here? It's still stalled out. You're still going to do what we need done, whether you got something funny to say about it or you got some clever way you think you're going to get out of it. That kind of, it's still there, but it's not the be all end all. It's not the ultimate sense. So, what's the issue here? Directionality. Directionality. Adam and Eve, right? What did they seek? To be like God, right? They sought a earthly method from down here to get themselves up, right? The wise man here is seeking wisdom to raise himself up to ultimate knowledge, to godhood in a sense, right? Whatever they believe, or the fullness of man, that some hierarchy to raise themselves up. Discernment, cleverness, discerning of the same thing. It's a movement from here up. It's a bottom up. I can understand. I have understanding. I'm clever, right? And I'm moving up this ladder of cleverness or understanding or knowledge. It's not how it works. It works to some extent, but it's very limited. And again, limits are good and limits are there for a reason, because what kind of basketball game do you have if you don't have the out of bounds lines, right? No one ever hits a home run if you don't have an out and a fence, a wall for them to hit it over, right? That doesn't happen. So these limits are good, um, but they are very limited. We are limited in our finitude, in our humanity, but we know where the source of wisdom comes from. It's from up down. The trajectory is from heaven to earth. Trajectory is from Christ into man, not vice versa, right? And only in that sense can you have the fullness of wisdom and discernment and cleverness and whatever else you're looking for. So anyway, this one's going to go long. All right, let's push it. Where is the one who is wise? Where's the scribe? Where's the debater? Has not God made foolish the wisdom of this world? So the wise guy, the scribe, who's interpreting, writing things down. The scribes did that a lot. You take the old. We're doing that. We're taking text, or we're evaluating it, interpreting it. Right. That's part of the words of scribes. Debaters, arguing for a cause, disputing between different views. Right. And that's a lot of what he's going to be doing in this book. Not all bad things, but he's saying, where's the guys who are doing this from where? An earthly perspective, right? The guys who are doing this to tear down what's above from the bottom, right? That's the who needs it. So has God not made foolish the wisdom of the world? Okay, so now we're talking about the wisdom of the world, the cosmos. That's that word there, right? The entirety of this whole system. God has made it foolish. For since in the wisdom of God, the world did not know God through wisdom, it pleased God through the folly of what we preach to save those who believe. Okay, God has made foolish the wisdom of the world, for since in the wisdom of God, the world did not know God through wisdom. That's a mouthful, right? I mean, he keeps doing that to us, which is, that's what half what makes it fun and what makes it difficult. So, anyway, all right. So, the wisdom of the world has been made folly, right? Because in God's wisdom, the world didn't know God through its own wisdom, right? So, let's take just the cosmos, since that's the word for world. The humanity at large is a scientific, rationalistic worldview of existence, of the cosmos, right? So what have we done? We've removed God, we've sidelined God, right? Again, it's like the removing the power of the cross. It can't be done, but in our level, in our view, it can be. We can sideline God. We can remove the power, hiding it behind the veil of our own wisdom and discernment and everything else, sin, right? So in its ultimate sense, can't be done, impossible. But on a personal level, on a human level, it can be done. Um, the view of the cosmos from writ large from humanity is scientific, rationalistic, um, enlightenment thinking. So we've systematized. Everything's a math equation. We know what everything is built of: atoms and substructures and all these things, DNA, everything that makes everything what it is, right? And yet that's not how it works, right? That doesn't get you up to heaven because you can explain the heavens in a math problem. It doesn't get you up to the heavens, right? It's only God who raises humanity up, right? In that sense. So that's what he's doing. The wisdom of the world can't get up that high, but the wisdom of the God who holds the cosmos in his hands and who all live, move, and breathe, he can bestow it upon humanity. And then we live out of that sense. And it doesn't negate the scientific, the mathematical equations of how the movements of the sun and the stars, and it doesn't negate any of that, but it brings it up to its fullness. It makes a more robust understanding of the whole, which none of us will fully grasp, until everything's done, said and done. But okay, moving on. So we're gonna shoot for 120 minutes with this one. All right. So it pleased God through the folly of what we preach to save those who believe. So he's not saying, remember we went through the folly thing. It's not really folly, right? But he's using that word, pleased God through the folly of what we preach. How foolish is it to just say some things about a God who died on the cross and resurrected again? But it saves the people who believe, and how foolish that may sound to the rational, wise, discerning mind of this world, right? And then he elaborates later on next week or next time we'll see, on the flip side of that one. But for now, let's keep it pushing. For Jews demand signs, and the Greeks seek wisdom. Okay, so the Jews wanted a sign. They wanted something to see. And Christ was like, well, the only one you're going to get is this, the sign of Jonah, right? Like he was in the whale 3 days, and I'm going to be in the belly of the earth for 3 days, right? Um, and the Greeks seek wisdom, right? But they seek wisdom again from a bottom up, from man up, which has never worked from Genesis 3, right? It just doesn't work. Never has, never will. It's severely limiting. Anyway, and you look around, it seems like it's increasingly limiting, but however that works. But anyway, they don't seek wisdom from above; they seek wisdom from here, and they have a sense of wisdom from a outside source. It's Sophia, right? Is wisdom. That's a goddess of wisdom in their view. So there is a little transcendence there. We'll talk about that later. Um, but verse 23, but we preach Christ crucified, a stumbling block to the Jews and folly to the Gentiles. So Christ crucified, the God of the world, on a cross, right? Cross that he created. He grew that tree. He planned that tree to be there from before time ever was going to be a thing, right? For the creation of the earth, that tree was always going to be there, that he hung himself on. That he was hung on. Let's put it that way instead. So anyway, a stumbling block to the Jews. So um, where did I go? I lost it. Anyway, they're falling all over the place. A stumbling block. And what is Christ? The rock. So the very rock of Christ to us is our firm foundation and ground we stand upon. Everything else is shifting sands, right? Is the same one that they keep tripping on. So again, two sides, right? I can't beat you over the head enough with this. I'll have to keep it under 20 minutes, so I'll have to. Oh man, we're at 19. Jeez. Anyway, all right, long one today. I'm not apologizing anymore. So anyway, and then that's to the Jews. Two sides of the same thing, right? Folly to the Gentiles, right? So they they see wisdom as again a movement up, an ascension, not wisdom from flowing down, and then the ascension comes afterwards. They don't have that, right? I heard a Jewish guy say, what kind of God can die? Well, okay. That's in large part what the problem is with you. But anyway, verse 24, but to those who are called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ, the power of God and the wisdom of God. So here we go. Um, all I really got to say about that is, Mick Jagger said it best. Can't always get what you want, but if you try sometimes, you get what you need, right? They didn't get the signs and the wisdom that they wanted. And so they consider it folly and they fall all over the place. And yet they got the sign and the wisdom they needed. Or it's there, it's available, right? And if you just try and you pay attention, right, to the folly and whatever, this guy might sound stupid, but he's giving you the gospel. If you're paying attention, the power and the wisdom of God are inherent in those words about the word, the testimony about Christ, right, as Paul said earlier. Lastly, verse 25, the foolishness of God is wiser than men, and the weakness of God is stronger than men. And Paul later on says, I'd rather boast in my weakness. Why? Because the power of God comes through that. It's seen, it's evident, right? Christ crucified in weakness, and yet what? Raised in power, right? To above all things. You know what I mean? Like, what are we talking about? What are we even, where's the debate? In house, where's the debate? It shouldn't be one, right? So take your view, take my view, all these things that come up in the future of this text. Go ahead, have it, have at it, do your thing. You don't have to eat this steak. I'll eat it. I don't care about that Buddha statue at the Chinese place. This place is bomb. I'm eating it, right? You go ahead and have your scruples, and then we'll deal with that from there. But I don't have an issue. You shouldn't either, right? The non-negotiables, the limit lines are blessings, right? Why do you want to go out of bounds? And of course, stay within the reins. But those aren't there as restrictions. He'll say later, what restricts you is you, not the out of bounds lines, not the guidepost God put. Hey, go no further. Hey, this is not acceptable. Those aren't what restricts you. Freedom is found within those lines, right? You don't have a basketball game with outside of those lines. You stay outside, your game's over. Don't play by the rules. What fun is this game? It doesn't work. We see kids do that all the time, right? Start making up the rules as they go. People aren't having fun because it never works out to where it's fair or competitive, right? You lose what it's supposed to be without lines. So the lines are not the problem. We are the problem. All right. So anyway, went long. Who cares at this point? You're welcome. There, take that. So try not to do these anymore. The 22-minute deal. Again, I'm going to stop going back and forth to the bringing things back with us from the last week. So that'll shorten them up. But thank you for bearing with me, and we'll see you next time.